Welcome back to another edition to Root to Rising podcast. I am your host, Christine Hummel, and today I have another special guest with me, Sandy Loreaux, who will be joining us to tell us about her professional and personal journey. So Sandy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Christine. I'm really excited to be here.
Great. So Sandy, as the first question I always ask everyone is, tell us a little bit about yourself, your personal brand and your professional brand.
When I think about personal brand, I think about, if I were to ask other people, what would they say about me? Or over the years, right? What have people said about me, right? And I think of really three things. One is crisis manager, right? Even early in my career, and it just continued right through the latter part of my career. I had this reputation for, well, if there's a dumpster fire, we can give it to Sandy and she'll be able to get control of that situation, stabilize things, or if we've got a short runway towards a launch, or whatever it is, something that is very intense, complex situation. Somehow I would find myself in those roles. And in fact, I've heard people describe me as, well, you're the type of person that runs to the fire, right? So I'd say that's one element of my brand, a personal brand. The other is, I would say, it's more about me as a leader, right? I think I have a reputation of being a transparent leader that cares about people. And, I started to become more aware of that over time as I was moving to organizations that required me to build out entire teams, right? I didn't fully appreciate it until I found myself in roles where I had to build out a team, and I was able to do it, even in situations where those people were walking into a difficult environment. They were willing to do it because they trusted me. And then the third part of my personal brand, and this really developed over time, because when I started my career, I didn't have a family, I didn't have children, but somehow I found myself as a mother of 5. And so over time, I really developed this brand as being like the poster child for the working mother, and found myself in situations where other women wanted to speak to me, primarily about that, right? Like, how do they balance their career against all of their family responsibilities?
All three very different
Yes.
personal brands. So maybe to go through the first one, crisis manager. Not many people have described themselves on this show. When I say, what's your personal brand? They don't say crisis manager. So talk us through how you got to that brand, and why does that motivate you, or why do people come to you to help them with the crisis or having a short runway? How did you get to that?
Yeah. I really don't know how I got to it, right? It's probably a little bit separate
Yeah.
serendipity, like when I think back really early in my career, in marketing, I found myself getting moved from brand to brand at some point, because there was either, a problem with that brand. Like, for example,
Yeah.
we just went through our third back order. We're down to below 1% market share. This is our last chance to turn this year around, brand around within 1 year. If we don't do it, they're pulling promotion and harvesting it. Right. So I got that jump. I should probably say that,
Yeah.
I'm a pharma professional. I grew up in the pharmaceutical industry, and I spent my first 19 years at a big pharma company and its legacy organizations. And when I got recruited out, someone that was a former head of North America. She had left and moved to a company called Valiant. At the time, Valiant had gotten themselves into, I'd say, quite a bit of hot water with respect to legacy pricing practices, and I'd say egregious price
Yep.
increases over short periods of time. And so they were in a very difficult situation from a public perception standpoint, but also from a business perspective, because you had every payer and PBM in the industry ready to, remove all their products from formulary.
Yep.
So I was brought in at that time to head up market access and build out their market access organization and essentially stabilize the situation with the payers. That was probably the most intense 6 to 9 months of my career. I mean, I'm talking like barely sleeping, being in hotel rooms, living on beef jerky and coffee, trying to figure out how we were going to, protect the business. Then when I left Valiant, I left and I joined a company called Mallinckrodt that had similar challenges with respect to their prior pricing practices on one of their products. And so, I literally had people joking with me that were, working on the payer side, right? Like executives from, national health plans and pharmacy benefit managers that were calling me the bravest person in pharma, right? But I don't know why, I think I like a good challenge. When you ask me like why, how did I
Yep.
find myself, in those situations? I do like a challenge. Um I'm willing to I like rolling my sleeves up, right? Like I like doing hard work. I like feeling like I accomplished something, like I did something
Yep.
that, mattered.
Yep.
And I guess those types of scenarios put you in a situation where you're successful, right? It feels really good, to know
Yep.
that you overcame something that difficult.
Yeah, and we'll get to what you're doing now, but it is important for everyone to know. I mean, you were in the biopharma industry for what, over 30 years? Is that correct? 25?
29. So
And
I
then
started, yeah.
you've transitioned to something different, but going back to the crisis mode, there's a challenge, but then there's taking on, what you did, walking into two very high stakes roles where the pressure was on. And a challenge is defined differently by all. I would say that's a very significant challenge. And I'm going to go to ask why were you motivated and why was eating beef jerky and drinking coffee okay? Like what you got energy in some way, shape, or form from that, right? And it was a very complex problem to solve. But what was your motivation or what gave you the energy to continue? And then, oh, by the way, you didn't just do it for one company. You went and you did the same thing for the other. So you said you like the challenge and it feels good, but not many people can exist on beef jerky and coffee and not sleep, right? So what motivated you every day to wake up and be like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to solve this problem.
Well, I would say you can't live on beef jerky and coffee forever. So it has to be, you have to know that it's going to be for a finite period of time, right? And that if you are successful, you're going to get to a normal diet and sleep patterns. I think I wanted to build something, right? I had the opportunity to do a lot of different things. But when I was leaving there and they were asking me, my senior leadership was asking
Mhm.
me, why are you leaving? I said, because I'll never get to do here
Yep.
what I'm going to get to do there. This company is too well established, right?
Yep.
I'm never going to get to be able to build something out here. I'm going to get to build out this organization. And if I'm successful, right? If I'm successful, like that's going to be a great
Yep.
story.
Yep.
And I'm going to get a lot of personal satisfaction from that. The other thing, like I got to build my own team, right? So the other thing that I've learned over time is who you work with, right?
Mhm.
Like that makes a huge difference in terms of the type of satisfaction you get out of your work, right?
Yep.
Like I got to work with some really amazing people there. Like I loved my team there. And so we were in it together, right? Like that feeling of
Yep.
being in the trenches,
Yep.
fighting through something with people that you really like and that you really respect. Like I get a lot of energy out of that.
Yeah, it is interesting. I agree with that comment of the people you work with as you get more experienced as a professional and you have more and more roles or been with more companies, that becomes more important than anything. And you don't learn that. I think there's a certain time of your career where you reflect on that and you're not necessarily going for the job. You're going for the people or that leader. And I
Right.
know throughout your career, you had a lot of people that left, organization to organization, and they followed you. And to your point, it's not that they just wanted a good leader, but they want that, just the embracing of good people around them, because you're a unit, you know how to accomplish things together. And it is very, as a leader, it is very, very rewarding to have people you trust and to have people that you know you can delegate to. Maybe advice for, I don't know if it's the younger generation listening or more experienced professionals, but it's not about just the job description or the title, but look and challenge yourself to what kind of leader you're going to work for or the people you're going to work with, because you're much more motivated doing that together and you can overcome more challenges if you're with those people. But maybe make some comments on what your thoughts are of that and how you
Yeah.
continually surrounded yourself with people that you trusted and knew, could eat beef jerky and coffee with you.
Right. The well, I'll tell you one thing that I did as a leader,
So,
because this is so important to me, and I think it's so important as it relates to team performance, right?
mm,
When I did find myself in a situation where I was in that leadership position and I got to build my own leadership team, I didn't hire anyone without the peers that that person
mm,
would be working with being part of the interview process and weighing in on it. And there's one instance in particular where, there was an individual that interviewed for a job on my leadership team, and this person was a great candidate. On paper, I mean, they were probably the best candidate that we
mm,
saw. But I had the 3 other individuals that were on the team that would have been his peer interview him, and they all said the same thing. Interview great, on paper,
yep,
perfect, but there was something about him, they just didn't fully trust him. And I said, "Well, then I'm not
yeah,
hiring him. Like, I
no,
can't if that's how you feel,
yep,
I can't bring him onto this team because we'll never get the synergy that we
right,
need. You'll never get the unstructured communication, right? You're never going to
yep,
pop in his office and say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" Right?
yep,
That's how you get, I feel like that next level team performance. But if there's something there that's missing with
yep,
respect to trust, right? Like they're never going to be fully open with
yep.
that person.
Yeah, and that correlates too to interviewing, right? So you may be the perfect person on paper with all the experience, with all the internships, with, all the different classes you took. But if you don't connect with that person or those colleagues, like you said, you had your colleagues interviewing with that person, you have to connect and they have to have this level of trust where you can be part of the team of the company. It's not just about that job description. So it kind of overflows, not just being part of a team, but connecting to someone in an interview process.
Yeah. And I think, the other value you get from having that kind of personal relationship, and I think this is for peers as well
Yep.
as for a leader with their employees. When you have that personal connection, and you really feel like that person cares
Mm.
about you, well, now
Yep.
that person's able to give you direct feedback,
Yep.
constructive feedback
Yep.
when you need it, right? There's a relationship there. There's a level of trust there, right? That
Yep.
person knows it's coming from a good place, right? It's coming from a good place, like that they genuinely care about the person and they want to
Yep.
help them. And I think that, that's helpful for individual performance because now
Agreed.
that creates a better environment for people to get better feedback and actually
Mm.
internalize that feedback and do something with it.
And that has gotten a little bit more difficult, I would say, from my perspective, post-COVID. There's been more time I've noticed as a leader with personal and professional support development because there's so much different complexities going on that were introduced during COVID that have
Mhm.
carried us through. So and also the world's just more complex. I mean, there's social media, there's more people, dealing with different situations. So I think that as a leader today, it's not what it was 20 years ago. It's not here's your performance score, here's the metrics you achieved it. It's a lot more supporting them personally and professionally from a holistic approach in life and making sure, because if they're happy personally, right, and they're motivated personally, they will only be able to carry that over to their professional spectrum and carry that forward. So I think the leadership has evolved in terms of how you support your people. But I don't know what your perspective is on that.
Do you think that that is because we are working in a more virtual environment than we used to, so we don't have the same level of connectivity?
I think that's part of it. That could be part of it. I do think also social media, right? There's more stresses that we have as individuals. Therefore, showing up to work is a lot more challenging
Uh-huh.
because of who knows what's happening behind the scenes. I think COVID, for some states and some people, isolated people to be virtual, even younger generation. Like a lot of them didn't go to school, they were online for a year and a half, right? So you kind of pulled back and now you're thrown back into it and people showed up differently. They needed more to reintroduce themselves into the human workforce or into the college, and it's almost, teaching the personal connection all over again. And
Yeah.
so now as a leader, and I remember during COVID, that was a totally different way to lead people virtually. That was probably one of the most complex things I've ever done, was lead people over the over a Zoom call, right, when you never
Right.
could see them. But now we carry that through, and they just carry there's so much more going on. I think social media has a lot to do with it. The world's faster, right? We're more
Yeah.
efficient. People are dealing with a lot more. And so people just need this balance between personal and professional support. And I can't coach someone professionally if they're not with me personally. Like if there's something off in their personal life, they're not showing up professionally. It's almost like the personal has to always be side by side, and there's a checkpoint before you can go to the professional side.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I agree with all of that. I mean, I think this is an interesting story. One of the things, like when COVID first hit, not that I was happy about COVID, but I'm not going to lie,
Yeah.
I was kind of loving working from home,
Yeah.
right? Like after having a 90-minute commute one way for 20 years, right? Like this is kind of nice.
I could wear my pajamas when I'm on a call.
Right? And then we went to hybrid and hybrid was good. But then I went to a company that was fully virtual, right?
Mm,
And then
mhm.
my next company, because my last role, my last corporate role before I just moved into full-time consulting was a startup. I was CEO for a development stage startup company. So we had no revenue coming in. So we were
Yep,
virtual.
yep.
And I realized my husband actually said to me one day, he's like, you got to get out of this house. Like, you're losing your mind. Right?
He was
And
just
he
thinking
was
of you wearing
No,
pajamas,
he
actually.
was right. No, I actually was getting dressed because I couldn't. Like, I couldn't,
I
like,
was too, I
because
was
at
too.
first you were like, oh,
Yeah,
yeah, it's kind of nice. And then
yeah,
you realize, like, no, I got to dress myself.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
losing it. So I did realize that, like, I was like, God, I can't wait till we get an office because I need to,
yep,
I loved hybrid was a great balance. But what was interesting was, so one of the people on my team there, he's somebody that I mean, I've known him for 25 years. And there were a number of people on that team, though, that I had never worked with before. And he said to me one day, he's like, hey, he said, you need to do a better job of connecting with the people on the team
hmm.
that don't know you like I know you. He
Oh,
said,
wow.
he said, like, those of us that know you, like, like, I'm trying to remember exactly what he said, but it's
Yeah,
been a few years, but the gist of it was like, they're not getting the Sandy that we
yep,
know because
yep,
they're not getting the joking around coming into the meeting and leaving the meeting and
yep,
the side
yep,
conversations and as much personal conversations. Like they're not seeing that side of you because all we're doing is we're jumping on this Zoom call, then we're getting off and then
yep,
we're jumping on the next
yep,
and then we're going, and I thought like, wow, that is really, really good feedback. And it's not something that to me, I was still the same person, right?
yep,
Like in my own mind, I'm no different than I always was. But but I wasn't on the receiving end
yep.
with the people that never worked with me in an environment where they got all that like extra connectivity.
That's
Right.
right.
And so I had to work harder. Right. So then I was like, okay, how do I work harder to still like have those
Yeah,
personal conversations
yep,
and make that connection? and, build in a little bit of time so that it wasn't all, all business all the time. And it
Yeah,
made
no,
a
I agree.
difference. Like I was
Yeah,
really, really thankful for that
yeah.
feedback.
Yeah, kudos to that employee that gave you that feedback. And that I agree with that. I think it was taking time and virtually or hybrid or in the office, it's taking time for that person no matter where they're at and having communication with them. So before we transition to what you're doing now, maybe to go back to your biopharma days and I'm staying on this crisis manager brand. What gave you the confidence to be able to walk into those different positions and those greatest challenges? Where did you get your confidence from?
I don't know. I can't say that I know what the source of it is. I just have always kind of felt like, well, why not me?
Hmm,
Like, why not? And if I'm not successful, what's the worst thing that's going to happen?
mhm,
Right. I mean, so if it doesn't work out, am I going to be unemployable? No, I've seen plenty of people over the years
yeah,
get laid off or let go, and everybody lands on their feet.
yep,
I've yet to see somebody that just has not been able to land on my feet. So I always just felt like I am going to, give it my best, and if it if it doesn't work out, I'll know that I did everything that I could have possibly done, and I'll move on to the next challenge.
yeah,
And maybe I
mm,
wouldn't have moved on to if I wasn't
yeah,
successful, maybe
yeah,
I then I would have been a little bit more reticent to do it again, but
yep.
for the most part, it's worked out.
Why do you think there's a difference of women that feel the why not, like you just said? Like, why not me? Versus I can't do that, why me? Like there's a difference of our generation, more experienced professionals, even younger women that I speak to that just graduated college, entering into the workforce. Some of them, they feel like they don't have enough confidence or they don't want to apply for the job or they have anxiety going into the interview. What's the difference of that person versus what you just said, like the why not me?
So it's if you know you touched on it, right? Like if you read LinkedIn or LinkedIn, lean in.
Lean
If you
in.
read
Yep.
lean in or, read anything as it relates to gender differences in the
Yep.
workplace, right? Like there's plenty of statistics out there like women feel like they have to meet 100% of the job
Mhm.
qualifications to apply for a job where men feel like it's
Yep.
60%, right? Like different studies like that.
Yep.
So I think there's things like that we're all aware of and we've all seen. When I think about my personal experience with women that have doubted themselves, a lot of times it comes from a place of how are they going to balance their home life and their career life. I've had a lot of women over the years want to meet with me because they're wrestling with, well, I really want to go for this director job, but I don't know if I can do it because, I've got two kids or, I've got a family and
Yep.
so I do think that sometimes it comes from a place of this sense of responsibility and
Yep.
how am I going to be the mom and the wife that I want to be and be able to, do this job that's bigger
Hmm.
than the one that I have right now.
So they're not just saying that to the specific job, they're saying it overall, just holistically, how do they do it all? That's what they're
Mhm.
asking themselves
Yeah.
before they even sign up for that job. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fair. That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, and again, this is just my experience in the
Yeah,
things that women have come to me with.
yeah. So what advice do you give those women that come to you that ask you how to do it all?
I'm
What's the
like, you
secret
just
sauce?
There well, if you
There is none.
wait there isn't. I say, "You know what? Sometimes you just have to jump into the deep end of the pool and figure it out." Like,
Right.
believe that you're going to be able to figure it out,
Yep.
right? Like
Yep.
that, because I never had a plan. I never had a plan. Like, I had an opportunity, I went for it. Um, and was able to work it out. Now, there is there is a very real side to this that is something that a lot of people don't necessarily talk about, right? And that is you better choose the right partner.
Yep.
You better choose the right life partner if you want to be able to have it all. Because there are people, and there are husbands that do not make their wives feel
Yep.
like they can have it all. I I'm going back, God, this is more than 15 years ago, but this story still, I think about it and it still makes me so sad. I had a team and one of the women on my team had two young kids. Her husband had a big job. She also had a great career, loved her job, right? She had a really, really, y- you know, she was an account manager, right? Had an exceptional relationship with her accounts. The team, we had a great team
Yep.
dynamic. She loved her teammates. They loved her. Everything was great. She's a
Yep.
great performer. She comes into my office one day and tells me she's resigning. And was,
Yeah.
I was shocked. Like I totally didn't see it coming. Um, and she she started to cry and said that her her husband told her that if she wanted to work, she could continue to work, but she also needed to be responsible for 100% of the responsibilities at home because he wasn't doing anything. And she's got to a breaking point. She said, I can't do this anymore.
Can't do it all. Right.
Right. So, uh, I mean,
So what
to
advice
me,
what
well,
advice did you give her? I don't know
I
how you
mean,
stayed quiet with that one.
I don't, it was tough, but again, because I was kind of caught flat footed, which
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
happen often,
Yeah.
but there really wasn't any advice to give, right? What am I going to say?
Yeah.
Divorce your husband?
Yeah. You picked wrong.
Right. I mean, look, and maybe that was the right choice. I'm not saying, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to suggest she had a bad marriage in
Yeah.
any way, shape, or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
form,
Right.
right? But she was in a situation where she couldn't have it all,
Right,
and
and if someone that you see that gets fulfilled by her career, right, there should be a level of respect, and someone that is that motivated and fulfilled, let her have it and compliment that person
right.
versus saying it's gotta be all or nothing. So, throughout your career, or what advice would you give, or what advice did you give to people about picking the right partner? And I also wanna integrate that with your comment of I didn't have a plan, because I do believe that you can plan all you want, but there's 5 different forks in the road that are gonna split it, intersect
Yeah.
it, and lead you on different paths. So, maybe talk a little bit about the advice that you would give the younger generation listening to this about what you should look for if you're motivated by your career and you wanna grow professionally. What worked for you, in choosing a partner? What should they look for? And then how do you integrate that all to the bigger picture and to the plan?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's tough to give advice on who someone should marry, right? But I can speak to my personal experience. I was married, divorced, and then remarried, and I've been married to my husband for it's been more than 15 years now. So I don't necessarily give advice and say, "Hey, you should find someone like this." It's more about speaking about my personal experience with my second husband because he's been incredibly supportive, right? And we would joke that we would have a logistics meeting every Sunday night, in the house just to figure out how we were covering off on it all. And it really, it comes down to somebody's got to make concessions, right? Like everywhere along the way.
Yep.
And I would say that, he made a lot of concessions for me over the years, right? Like if I was moving into a bigger job, then okay,
Mhm.
I'm going to stay in this role because you're going to be
Yep.
traveling a lot. This role is not going to require me to travel, right? Like things like that. Like when we were making job changes,
Mhm.
we were very cognizant of what that was going to
Yep.
mean for our family. And then, it's like division of duties in the house, right? There's none of this like, well, you still have to take care of 100% of the house of the things at home.
Yep.
Like, no, like we are both we both just divide and conquer. And
Mhm.
the joke in our house is that he does has no idea how to work the washer and dryer, and I don't even know the password for our personal computer. So, like
You've divided and
we
conquered those roles. And
right.
what you're saying is maybe the characteristics is there has to be a level of respect that the 2 people in the relationship are equal no matter what that means for you. And that whatever motivates you, if you wanna be professional in a career, if you wanna be a stay-at-home mom, it's still a respect that you have for one another, and then there's always a divide and conquer, because there's a lot going on just with individuals, but then if there's children, and it's constantly reassessing what everyone needs, and it's not one person doing one thing. It's almost like your
Right.
team, right? You're dividing and
Exactly.
conquering. Yep.
And there's gonna be times when one person's gonna have the
Mhm.
opportunity to do more than the other, and you have to be willing to
Be
kind of
okay.
go
Yeah.
back and forth like that, right? And be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, well, no, I'm gonna sit tight here because you're doing that."
Yep.
And, if that just makes more sense for our
Yep.
family. The other thing that I would say, if I were giving advice, is actions speak louder than words, right? It's
Mm.
easy for someone to say, "Oh, yes, I support you," and talk about how wonderful you are to everybody else. But then behind closed
Yep.
doors, they're not actually walking the
Doing
talk.
anything.
They're not
Yep.
actually doing anything to help you, or what they're saying to you is like, it's like making you feel bad or making you feel guilty,
Right.
not actually being, your cheerleader.
Yeah, and I think that's important for the younger generation to hear, because people and men can be very persuasive for what they say, like, "Yes, I'll support you when we have kids," or, "Yes, I support you in your career," but does that person show up for you, right? If you have
Right.
a hard job transition, are they supporting you? Did they take, an extra couple of, home tasks to help support you through a hard time, and even, how they interact with you and respect your work. I mean, if they want to leave for dinner and you're still working, do they respect you to stop? So I agree with the actions speak louder than words, because anyone can say anything. So be
Uh-huh.
very cognizant of your partner and the actions even earlier on, because that's only going to progress as they get older and as your relationship matures. That will just continue to evolve originally how their actions match their words. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good advice. That was a new one for this show, so I'm glad you brought that up. So so you were in biopharma for 25, 30-ish years, and you recently transitioned to a new role. Maybe tell us a little bit about what you've transitioned to and why you made the transition.
Yeah. So again, I spent my first 19 years big pharma. I'm a pharmacist by training, so I started in medical affairs, but spent many years in marketing, went into sales leadership, market access, which for non-biopharma people, that's, pricing and dealing with insurers and the government. And then I moved to these smaller companies and bigger
Mhm.
roles. My last role was CEO of development stage private company. But then after about a year and a half of um was a real grind, I would say. I was dealing with there were a number of things going on with my kids. So one of my sons was diagnosed with OCD. I needed to find him a therapist and get him set up with a 504. He was going to be going into middle school. My other son, he needed some pretty major sinus surgery. He was a cleft lip baby. It turns out he had all these structural
Mhm.
issues, so he needed a pretty major surgery. And then he presented with another medical issue
Mm.
where he needed to have another surgical procedure done. And what hit me was when he needed that other surgical procedure done, I realized that it had been a year since we'd gone to the ENT
Mm.
about his nasal surgery consult, and I'd done nothing since then because
Mm.
I didn't have the time to deal with it. And then I had all these other things going on, with my other son, and then, this other surgery. And I started to really question whether or not the balance was right for me
Mhm.
at this point in my life. And then I also realized, like, I have 3 kids in college. My younger 2, you know, it because they're twins, I started to realize I have 5 years left, and that's it, and then I'm an empty nester. Is this how I wanna spend those next 5
Mhm.
years? You know, struggling to figure out how I'm gonna actually get my kids the medical attention that they need,
Yep.
and, and I also realized, I had probably been operating at a pretty high steady state level of cortisol
Mhm.
for a lot of years. And I just started to like reflect on I'm 50, I'm 52 now, but at the time I was 50 and I'm like, how do I want to spend the second half of my life? Is this it?
Yep.
And that's does not to say that I didn't really enjoy my career
Yep.
and I loved it. Like I loved it. I loved it for a really long time.
Yep.
But I was changing, and I decided that I'm at a point in my life where I want to reprioritize. I need to deal with these things with my kids. I also need to take better care of myself. And so I stepped down from my position, took care of all the stuff with the kids, and really use that time to reflect on what do I want to do now? Do I want to re-enter? Do I want to do something different? I got myself certified in executive coaching and I started to dabble in that a bit. And now I'm a year and a half in and I've I've got pretty steady work now that's probably about 50% executive coaching and
Yep.
like leadership workshops, and the other 50% is more business consulting projects, largely in like the market access
Yep.
space. And I'm loving it. I really feel like it gives me the ability to have control over my life and my schedule, but at the same time, give me the intellectual stimulation that I
Mhm.
want, um, and that I get from the work that I do.
So when you had the, um, issues going on with your kids, was it ever a conversation with your husband to say, who does what? Or was it, because let's go back to the partner conversation, like, why was it you that felt that you needed to take care of it? Was there a conversation that you and your husband had to say, "No, I'm in a place where I wanna reevaluate and I wanna do this," or was it just something that you felt like you had to do as a mom?
I wanted to do it, like, look, my husband, we are always having that conversation, and he does a lot, right? He
Yep.
would always, he probably took the kids to more doctor's appointments and things that I did,
Mhm.
for many years. But I I wanted to do it, right? It wasn't just that I felt like, well, I have to be the one. I
Yep.
I wanted to be the one. And I was killing myself. And
Yep.
honestly, he looked at me one day and was like, "Is it worth it? Like, is this
Mm.
worth it? Are you still happy?" Like, cuz I don't he saw the change in me, right? Like
Yep.
I wasn't getting I guess I wasn't getting the same level of return out of work as maybe I'd gotten in the
Yep.
past, right? So that's part of it too. Um,
So why is that
so
though? So if you go back to your earlier comments as you were motivated by a crisis manager, a challenge, you felt energy from it. Let's say call it fulfillment or faux fulfillment, who knows back then, right? But it was fulfillment at that time. And now at this time at 50, you have a different decision to make. You are fulfilled by different things. How does that evolution happen?
yeah. I think it was a couple of things, right? I actually think the virtual work environment may have been part of it for
Mm,
me because I get so
mm,
much energy from being around people.
people. Yeah.
And not having that for that extended period of time, I think it did affect me. I think the other thing was we were in a situation where, fundraising was a critical element,
Yeah.
part of the job, right? Based on where we were as an organization. And so it was a lot of dealing with investors, like, and trying to find new investors
Yep.
and, having to be at everyone's beck and call, right? Because
Yep.
so I think it was, a combination of things. where I didn't love what I was getting from the work
Yep.
and the challenge of having like no control over time management and trying to balance that against the family demands.
Yep.
It was a perfect storm.
And so my point is that it doesn't matter no at what you are at your career point based on how you wanna show up, it's your choice. So, back in the day when crisis manager work and that overwhelming challenge was something that motivated you at the time, and it's okay to evolve and change. And then at 50, you made this choice to be there for your kids and to try something that was more independent. Like, and my point is, it doesn't have to be the same path throughout. You don't
Right.
have to get to that endpoint that you've been working on your first 25. The middle can change. The Even if you're, let's say you graduated and you have a degree in marketing and you don't want to do marketing and you change to be in I don't know, like a healthcare business or something, it's okay to make that change because
Oh,
at
yeah.
that point in time it worked for you. And if you hear the different versions of women that have told the stories, they've learned throughout their experience, it's very different today than they thought how it was gonna go.
Yeah.
So, don't pigeonhole yourself in that one path, and don't think that there has to be these sequential next steps that happen. It's okay to do something different and to start all over again.
Well, and look, people reinvent themselves all the
Yep,
time, and I just feel like you're it's okay to be self-aware, right? Like, you should be
yep,
self-aware,
yeah,
and it's okay to I mean, for me, it was like, "You know what? I wanna get off the hamster wheel now,"
yep, yep,
right? I want to I want to take better care of myself, like I said.
yep,
I wanna feel better, I
yep,
wanna feel better. I wanna just, um I'm no less satisfied in my life doing
mm,
what I'm doing now than I was before, and that's why I say, like, I changed, right? So what
yeah,
I want out of my life is different than it was when I was, 32 versus 52.
and that's okay.
Yeah,
Like, that's okay. Yeah, because that makes you
and
happy in this
I
moment.
it's interesting how many people have said to me, like, "Wow, how brave," you know?
Right,
How
exactly,
brave,
exactly.
because I think a lot of people wouldn't do it, right?
I
For
agree.
purposes of optics, where, again, I never really cared about that, like, it's the
Optics are obligation, right? They feel like they just have to fulfill it. They have to work in this role till 65, and it's just the journey that was defined for us, and to go astray from that, it's scary not to follow the path that's worked for some, right? And to do something totally different.
right.
Yeah. No, that's the interesting perspective. So if you were going to give advice to the younger generation of women, I would actually say that and experienced professionals that are out there that are navigating, let's focus on the career first. Advice would you give them in terms of showing up in the workplace, having confidence, being brave, all the things we've talked about? What advice would you give those women today?
So I'd say for a younger person, I do think how you present yourself matters, right? One of the things that struck me post-COVID, right? You kind of brought up how COVID
Hmm.
changed things. People have gotten incredibly casual, right? I hate to
I
sound
agree.
so old-fashioned, but like you gotta dress the part, right? Like dress the part. Like
Don't wear
don't
moccasins to work, girls.
right. Like, come on. Like, and I think the other thing for young girls, like, be cognizant of your vocal inflection, right?
Hmm.
Like, that's
That's a good
when
one.
you want to speak with confidence, right? Like, you want to have a bit of presence, right? Take that seat at the table. I have heard
Yep.
that on your
Yep.
podcast from someone else, right? Like,
Yep.
women tend to
Yep.
kind of like, we'll take the chairs around the
Yeah.
wall. No, like,
Right.
sit at the table,
Right.
sit up, be
Yep.
present, right? Have a presence. I'd say for anyone, like not just the younger people, but people that are even further in their career, be open to feedback, be
Hmm.
self aware. I think about how much I learned about myself over the years. Like, it's important to continually work on yourself. Like, when I was young, when I was earlier in my career, like, I got feedback like, I speak in hyperbole. I was not very tolerant, like, I was really intolerant. If somebody didn't work like me, I just was, like, completely intolerant of them, like, they must be a loser.
Yeah.
Like, and I really took, and in a big pharma company, I mean, you're getting like personality tests and
Yeah.
360s like out the wazoo, right? So, but I really enjoyed that. And I really took that feedback
Yeah.
seriously and have worked really hard to, recognize that, yeah, I am a strong personality. I
Yep.
have to like bite my tongue not to just take over a conversation or talk over people or, like my mind, I can process things quickly. So I have a
Yep.
tendency to finish people's sentences, like, so I've really worked hard on those things.
Yeah.
I've really worked hard on being a more recognizing that people aren't going to work the way I do. They're going to work the
Mm.
way that they do. And that's okay, right? Like everybody's got different styles. Those styles can work for them. I also learned to recognize, like, look, I have to be cognizant of what somebody else's 100% is because their
Mhm.
100% may not be my 100%. But
Agreed.
is their 100% okay? And what does that look like? So, I think you really, you should never stop working on yourself and being open to feedback and taking it personally. I have a funny story. I worked for someone years ago and he had gotten feedback. He'd gotten a 360 and he was part of the process was he had to share it with his direct reports. And so me and my colleague are sitting there and he tells us, about I don't even remember what the feedback was, but he goes, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, these things always say the same thing. So, whatever." And my peer goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, I think you're supposed to actually work on those things so that it doesn't say that every time." It's
Some people it
hilarious.
doesn't work. Yeah, that is funny.
Right.
That's
So
right,
that was
listen to
like,
the feedback. Yeah, over his head. Or he knew
right.
it, he just didn't know how to deal with it, right?
And then,
So I'm
and then, yeah, personal story. This was actually
yeah.
funny too. I went to JP Morgan a couple years ago and meeting with these couple of guys and one of them looked so familiar. Right. And he's looking at me. And then we realized, so I worked on a co-promote back in like 2003,
Mhm.
2002. And and he was on the other side of the co-promote and he was like,
Mm.
"Oh my God." He's like, "I just figured it out." Right. And then he goes, "You calm down a lot." And
How
the
did you
other guy,
even respond to that?
I just started laughing. I was like, "Well, yeah, it happens." But what was funnier was the two guys who were on my team that were with me didn't
They're like,
know me
"No, she
then. They
hasn't."
only no, they walked out and they were like, "Okay, we need to understand that comment more." So, but that was
That's
pretty
funny.
funny. And actually, I think a really good example of,
Mhm.
yeah, like I was like probably like a little bit like a hyper little chihuahua early in
Yeah.
my career that was just,
But it got you to where you were and what
uh,
you accomplished.
yeah, but you have to be cognizant of you can't run
Yeah.
over people,
Yeah. Yep.
and so if that's the feedback that you're getting, then you got to take
Listen
it and
to
you
it.
have to do
Yeah.
something with it.
Yeah, but listening to it if it's for more than one person, because I think sometimes feedback we get as females from maybe a male to have different intent or different impact upon you, you got to take some of it with a grain of salt. So it has to be consistent feedback, maybe that you hear from a couple people within your team, different leaders, to make it something that you're actually going to work on. I would
I
say that
agree.
as a response, right?
I agree. Or you use the old, tell me more, give me some
Yeah,
examples, right? Right. To
exactly.
see if you can contextualize it more to
Agreed. So the same question I have from a personal perspective, if you were to give advice to younger generation or experienced professionals today on how to, I don't believe in work-life balance, that word. I don't believe in, we have it all. I think it's a constant juggle every day, what works for you. But if you speak to someone, these women personally, what advice would you give them? Doesn't have to be necessarily in regards to anything professional, but just personally, what should we be doing for each other? What should we be doing for our own selves? And then, how do you find your own purpose and happiness?
So I'd say one piece of advice, I would say something that I learned through my own experience is, it's okay to ask for what you need. Right? And
Mm,
what I mean by that is part of what helped me calm down over time, I'd say, is just life, having kids.
mm,
My father got in 2010, he got terminal cancer and I had to
mm,
take care of him. My parents were divorced, right? Like he didn't have anyone. I moved him in. Right when that was happening, I got asked to be the chief of staff for the North American president. And I told him, I said, this is what I'm dealing with, right? Like, I don't know what this is going to mean. It's going to be a lot of probably unpredictability. Like, I'm
yep,
his primary caregiver. Like, I'm going to need a level of flexibility to
yep,
deal with this. And I'm sharing that with you because if that's going to be an issue, then I can't take this job.
right.
And that was the first time in my career that I'd
Mm,
ever done anything like that. And he said, get done what I need and you can have all the flexibility you want. I just need the work to get done.
yeah.
And that is exactly how it was. And so what I learned through that was, I was scared to say that. Well, how's that going to
Mm-hmm,
reflect on me,
mm-hmm,
But I learned that, yeah, everything was fine. And then, when I was a single mother of my son, my older son, and, having to deal with navigating that. And, I would, you know, try to plan my travel for when he was with his dad so that I could be around for when he was there. Like I, I communicated to my leaders at that point, like, hey, I'm going to need this, or my son has something at school. I want to get to it. I really learned that you can ask for those things and nobody cares. Nobody cares as
mm,
long as you get done, as long as you deliver on your work,
yep,
like people will give you that. Like that's something that I don't think people realize. And it's why they're so afraid to, go for things because maybe they
I
don't
agree.
realize that it's okay to ask for that as long as you're performing.
Agreed. And if you start that conversation and you start telling people what you need, they then too become vulnerable and then they in response tell you what they need. Like I often
Right.
do that with my team. Like, hey, this week is a shitty week for X, Y, and Z reasons. Personally, I need you guys to step up or let's rally. And they then start sharing their vulnerability and what they need back. So it's being okay with no one's perfect. No one's gonna
Right.
have it all. No one's gonna bring 100% to both sides of the fence, personally and professionally, every day. We all need help, and it's okay to talk about it. It's not this perfect image we all have to have all the time because there is no perfect image.
No, I mean,
Yeah,
it's what, it's what they always say, right? Bring your whole self to work. Don't,
no matter what it
um,
is.
right.
Well, Sandy, thank you. This has been an awesome conversation. I knew the time would go quickly, and it sure did.
Thank
um,
you.
s-
I loved it.
no, I loved it too. And again, thank you to Sandy for joining us today on the Root to Rising podcast. As a reminder, this is a platform created for women to share their stories, for other women to listen, learn, and hopefully find their purpose. So, Sandy, thanks again.
Oh, thank you, Christine. It was wonderful.